Hello all you Shaman King fans, I'm Duuz-Diz-Din and welcome back to What's the Difference? The Shaman King edition, where I compare the various different versions of a media. Namely, with Shaman King, that's the manga, the 2001 anime, and the 2021 animated series. Last episode we were introduced to Lyserg and how that kind of panned out, with the manga taking a more direct approach in introducing Lyserg's character. He came off as a fairly cocky young man, but the 2001 anime had decided to have him be a little bit of a creep, having insulted and assaulted various different shamans and getting himself in a bit of trouble. Whereas the newer anime, he came off a little bit more standard. He was a little bit more conceivable why our heroes would actually take to him for the most part. But at this point, this is where the manga and the original anime really start to diverge, as certain plot points end up stretched out over the course of several anime episodes. So, in terms of the newer anime, I backtracked a little bit, as well as with the manga, as the plot point that involves Anna ends up being dispersed over the course of almost 10 episodes of more or less kind of filler material. But after I get through the backup storyline with Anna, then I'll go back and readdress some of the filler moments with the older anime, just so we can proceed forward with the newer anime without dealing with too much kind of getting in the way. Most of that material is just mostly so that the manga can have some time to get out more content and to also kind of build upon the relationship of our heroes. I mean, the trip that they take is one that's supposed to only take about 3 months, but 3 months is a good enough amount of time that anything could have happened in between, so having filler makes a little bit of sense. But let's jump into the adaptions and see where things take their best and worst turns. So we're in volume 10 of the Shaman King manga, the end of chapter 89, the end of the 2001 anime episode 29 episode Super Guts, and the end of the 2021 episode 14 Lyserg the Avenger. With the older anime, we see various different moments where we have Manta, Tamao, and Anna just kind of all hanging out for the most part, just in order to actually have the older cast kind of be relevant. Just little comedic moments for them to play out. Almost serves as letters to Yo. In the older episode, you see allusions to things that'll start to become very relevant. This sacred book that is seeking out How. He says no more time for delays and sends away one of his Shinigami spirits, but it will be a bit of a delay, as he calls out for Anna, but she doesn't really make a move for a little bit of time. Again, it's just a way of involving Anna and Manta in several different episodes. We then end up in episode 30, The Stolen Oracle Bell. And most of the Anna story is you have How spying on Yo like a creep, but you also have Mikihisa, who in the various different adaptations is either spying on Yo or he's spying on How. He mostly spies on Yo because it's easier, but he's also spying on How and relaying messages back to his father, Master Yome. We also pick up finally with Anna as well as Manta, because Manta ends up with the unfortunate role of, he was already playing this role, but being Anna's gopher for the most part, as she needs transportation in order to get to the place where she was originally trained at to be an Itoko. Some kind of priestess for the most part. Traveling to the most northern tip of Japan to a place called Mount Terror. So because Manta is actually loaded, which honestly with the older anime you wouldn't really know too much, because you're not introduced to Manta's parents or receive information about his family and all that kind of stuff. it kind of comes out of nowhere for the most part, but he owns a helicopter, so Anna makes full use of that and the friendship Manta has with Yo. And, having this take place over the course of several days starts to make a lot less sense, because you start to wonder what's Anna been doing in a lot of the intermediate time between all of this happening. But she's basically arrived at Mount Terror to gain this sacred object because she was contacted by Yo's grandmother, while Manta ends up being told to grab a list of souvenirs so that Anna can give it to Yo's grandparents, because she is the wife after all, and being brought into their family. But a lot of this is all to show just how closely the Asakuras are paying attention to the situation going on with Hao. And now we enter into episode 31, Forest of Holy Spirits. Yeah, a lot of the stuff going on with Anna is very sparse throughout the various episodes. And then you have more of Mikihisa spying on Hao. See, it's weird because it makes more sense for Mikihisa to be spying on Yo than Hao, because it's obvious Hao would know that Mikihisa is there. So Manta has no choice but to get all these souvenirs for Anna, which is probably a good thing that Manta's parents were never involved in the older adaptation, because they kind of call out Yo for apparently taking advantage of Manta, which isn't true. But if you look at it from the perspective of the older anime, it very much looks like Anna is taking advantage of Manta in the exact way his parents didn't want him taken advantage of. But it all ends up being to help out Yo and the greater good of the world, so it's a passable situation. And Hao, fresh off of messing with Yo, confronts Mikihisa about the fact that he's been creeping on him for the longest time. But Mikihisa knows a little bit better than to confront Hao head on. So, it's a nice little bit of atmosphere building, and Hao even drops down that, the situation between him and the Asakuras that has been going on for thousands of years. Well, 1,000 years. And how bitter the kind of rivalry they have going on actually is. And you have Anna, showing the preparations that she has to go through in order to summon this kind of tool, for the most part, that'll give her a little bit of a power boost. Although ultimately you find that the tool is just something good for her to have. Something called the 1080. And then you enter into episode 32, Horohoro's Taste of a Bitter Friendship, which actually will be the core of what I talk about in this episode. It's just that the Anna stuff is a lot more prevalent and comes to a forefront later on, and I kinda would rather just get that out of the way initially, because there's just so many detours the original anime decides to take. So you finally have Anna arriving at the Asakura compound with all the gifts that she forced Manta to buy, which is just her sucking up to the in-laws for the most part. And then she's asked if she brought the 1080 beads, which, are a tool that she'll need. And she also needs to purify because there hasn't been enough build up to what she's doing. This really goes to show you just how close the episodes were to the manga. They spin them wheels in order not to catch up. And it really does show the downfall of having an anime that constantly adapts rather than one that just comes in, adapts for about a season, 25 episodes or so, 25, 26 episodes, dips out for about a year, lets the manga get a little bit further along, so on and so forth. But the world of anime really has changed over the course of several years. Nowadays, a long-running anime only comes about because of the fact that it just has there's so much content to adapt, you can just keep going until you need to reach the end. And then you enter into episode 33, the mysterious Asakura family, which actually does a lot more. And that's kind of where Mikihisa spying on Yo kind of comes into play, as his spying ends up getting back to Yomei. And, it's obvious just how in touch Yomei and Mikihisa has been over the course of all of this. And it's not just a matter of, a few days later. No, it's very immediate. It's just like, okay, Hao is on the move. He's starting to get ready to do things. It's time to bring in the big gun. That's Anna. Because Anna is the stone coldest of bitches. And I say that with the utmost respect, lest she slap me. But she is 100% that bitch. Boss ass bitch. That bitch. You talk about Anna, you put some respect on that name. And Yomei finally decides to reveal exactly what Anna, Yo, and the rest of their friends are up against. The great Omyoji, Asakura Hao, and the information sealed in the Temple of Hao. And with that, we cut over to volume 11 of the manga, chapter 90, Ominous Star, as well as episode 15 of the 2021 series, When the Pieces Come Together, where we pick up underneath the Asakura compound with this shrine that was basically sealed or built upon for the most part. And make no mistake, it was built to seal something away. And hidden inside the shrine is something that the Asakura family has tried to guard against for thousands of years. Information on the great Omyoji Asakura Hao, a Buddhist monk. Of course, you have Tamao trying to spy on all of this because she really wants to be involved in everything that's going on, which is sweet if nothing else. She was originally being groomed for this position anyway, and Anna's a little bit stumped. It's just like, why would you be fearful of a being that was dead for thousands of years? And it's just like, yeah, she's not dead. And Yomei reveals that Asakura Hao has already revived, been reincarnated, and revealed himself to Yo. But Mikihisa has been, spying on Hao, spying on Yo, and getting the lowdown. It's just like, yes, Hao has been reincarnated, and he is participating in the Shaman fight. And then he tells the meaning of the pentagrams, how they're representations of, spiritual directions, elements, all that. Hao is very proficient in all things spiritual. And it also means he can control the forces of nature and even demons, fortune telling, all that good stuff. Hao is a very formidable person, even creating these things, these shikigami, ogres, in order to guard him and serve him. When he was part of the Asakura family, originally he brought them very much prestige the world over, well, at least in Japan. But then he decided he wanted to create a world of only shamans and wipe out humanity. And the Asakura family couldn't have none of that shit. And so they used their abilities to end Hao, but it was already too late. He mastered all these different techniques and abilities. He had become too powerful, and gained the ability to reincarnate and all that stuff. And with his goal being that to become a Shaman King, it's just like, okay, we can't give him that kind of control, that kind of power. It'd be too dangerous. Also love that in the older anime, Manta is at least present in all of this, as he knows about the encounter with Hao, because he was at least there for it for the most part in the older series. And they discuss if maybe Hao wants to bring Yo into it as well. And the fact that the weight of destroying Hao falls on the Asakura family. And the fact that Yo is completely in the dark about all of this, which Tamao isn't okay with for the most part. She speaks up against it. Although in the manga, she gets a slap from Anna because of this, because she thinks that Yo might not be able to, succeed over all of this. Respect the legendary slap. Anna has no doubt in Yo whatsoever. And I love that. She didn't need to slap Tamao over that, but even still, they have something that'll help them defeat Hao. And that's this legendary tome that Hao had, sealed away. And by giving that to Yo, he'll be able to stand a chance against Hao. And I love in the older anime, Hao is kind of getting notified that they're making these moves. And then we enter into episode 34 of the 2001 episode, The American Hot Spring, where we continue on the discussion of the book that should allow Yo in order to dominate over Hao. And Tamao picks up the tome, and it's just like there's a little bit of an issue, though. It's being protected by these very powerful Shinigami, which, Yomei Shinigami are much more powerful than. And unfortunately, Tamao removes the seal, and the seal is broken. Pochi and Kochi beat feet out of there, and it unleashes these powerful demonic entities, Zenki and Goki, which is a red Oni and a blue Oni, and they go a bit on the attack. For some reason in the manga, and they go after Pochi and Kochi specifically, I guess because they run, but in the older anime, they just attack whoever's around. Honestly, they're portrayed a little bit more creepy in the older anime, and they very much go on the attack. But Anna figures something out, and uses the 1080 in order to bind them, because she read from the book and is able to basically disperse the Oni, which just shows how much of a badass Anna actually is. Like, she is a badass bitch. And I love how Anna's just like, of course I could do this, because I am the wife of the Shaman King. And Hao is bleeding from it. I love this scene. It's just like, because the curse was linked to him. So, of course, it ended up, basically backfiring on him after it was defeated. And then we end up in episode 35, Vampire Legend 1080. They were worth all the trouble to get, thankfully. And the statement that ultimately it wasn't just the power of Anna's beads, it was her power as well. I love that Manta also gets to be introduced to Yo's grandmother as well. It's also pretty nice. But Anna is asked to deliver the book, mostly because she's just so powerful. And Anna just goes storming off immediately. Anna's just ready to go after a certain point. And, Kino, Yo's grandmother, has a lot to say about how capable she is, but the book alone won't be enough to actually defeat Hao. That's why they also sent along that specific package that Yo has yet to actually open. It's just like, yo, you have something capable of helping you out and you're not using it. With that, we dip on back to episode 29, Super Guts. For the most part, we'll be coming back to this one more time in next week's episode, mostly because this episode is mostly a Ryu flashback to when he trained with Yomei and Mikahisa and all that. But it also ties into this week's episode because this is after everyone kind of gets their gear repaired for the most part. For the most part, they're trying to just find their way to the Patch Village, and they're caught in this snowstorm. But you see all these various different shamans making their way through the mountain. With his board repaired, you see Horohoro enjoying some snowboarding and all that, just goofing off for the most part. Where in the older anime, Horohoro just kind of wipes out. And that's really the only actual connection this episode has to the manga outside of the stuff with Anna. But at least Lyserg is trying to be more attentive to what's going on with Horohoro. Now, when it comes to the newer anime and the manga, he's glad that his stuff is kindly fixed. And, you have just a little bit of camaraderie for what's going on between everyone. Initially in the manga, you had them being given a ride as Yo could kind of feel a chill running up his spine from everyone talking about him. And at this point in the manga and the newer anime, it's only been about 5 days. And Ren is really just ready to just find where they need to go. And whereas in the manga, it was kind of treated as something that Lyserg was hiding from everyone. In the newer anime, it's more treated like, well, Lyserg was just like, well, yeah, there was a reason why I was searching you guys out. So as at first it's treated more like Ren found him out, and here there's a little bit more trust going on in the newer anime. Lyserg only has so much experience, so he can't just up and find the Patch Village. We hear about how he qualified for the Shaman fight in general, and a lot of that came about because of Morphine. Morphine very much has, this great amount of skill and ability. And Morphine is given a little bit of shine here for the most part. She's very capable, but because they're not close to the Patch Village, they won't be able to find anything. Lyserg very much has a limited radius for the most part. And Horohoro kind of starts to fawn over how cute Morphine is. In fact, everyone kind of does. And Kororo actually starts to feel a little bit jealous. Poor Kororo. And then Lyserg's just like, maybe the thing that I was truly trying to find was friends. It's such a sappy moment. But it's great that Lyserg at least feels that way for the most part. It's a nice moment. But Horohoro's mostly just concerned about, getting in that gnarly curlage, man. I don't even know if that's the right terminology. So as Horohoro's getting ready to just snowboard and just go all over the place, he tries to use Kororo to help him get down the mountain, and Kororo's gone, so he goes plummeting down. Now, at this point, I'm mostly going to be referring to the older anime because Horohoro's moment doesn't come until a few episodes later, where this moment in the manga and the newer anime is all for Horohoro and Kororo and their growth. Whereas the older anime is just like, hey, we got Lyserg, we've got the lilies, and Horohoro being like, don't underestimate Mother Nature. And Horohoro and Ren are not okay with teaming up with the filler characters. However, there's the presence of a boss character. And, the blizzard ends up stopping because of Howl's Spirit of Fire, which I actually enjoy that in the older anime, that Howl's Spirit of Fire has that much power to stop a blizzard. Honestly, his posse for the better half of several episodes do nothing but follow. And then the lilies want to follow along as well. And then How's just like, hey, I'm just going to use this ability to just wipe out several of the shamans who are, climbing this mountain. And they're really just trying to show off the terribleness that is How, but also show off how unmatched Lyserg actually is in all of this, with the lilies trying to follow along like groupies. Well, some of the lilies. Honestly, the only lily that actually matters is Millie and the chick with glasses, whose name I don't remember. And the older anime really tries to grow the resentment that Lyserg has, especially over the course of several of these filler episodes. And Lyserg kind of sinks into this depression for the most part. This is something that I really remember in a lot of the older episodes, is the depression that Lyserg has over just how powerful How is. And it's at this point that Ryu tells his backstory for the most part, which I'm going to kind of jump over because of the fact that a lot of it gets adapted from the manga. But it's a very uplifting story about how Ryu at least was willing to try even against something that seemed impossible to fight against. It just shows how dedicated and capable Ryu had become. But Lily notices that How is up to something, and How is going to melt the frozen river, washing away all the shaman and having them caught up in the flood, and the rest of the lilies aren't really on board with any of that. And because they're not okay with it, they end up being like washed away with it as well. Love the animation that's done on the Spirit of Fire. And I love that all of them go in to try to help out. It's a good excuse for an action scene. And you end up seeing it a little bit early because they just wanted to do it for the most part. And that's the second version of Ryu's Oversoul. But it ends up not being enough, so you gotta get that teamwork! And even Lyserg helps out. So, sweet little moments here and there. So they actually ended up helping out their fellow shamans, which shows the better nature of Yo and his friends. And then you get Anna stuff. And thus, everyone travels on. Episode 30, The Stolen Oracle Bell, it starts off with a lot of the same scene that you typically see at this point. Despite the fact that they were in a frozen mountain range earlier, they're back towards a desert right by a highway. It becomes repetitive. It really brings out the repeated depression that Lyserg has, which really made me not like the character in the older anime, because that's all he talks about. Defeating How, his incapabilities, how weak he is. It gets so tedious when you have to listen to it over the course of several months. But whereas with the manga, and even with the newer anime, it's not really there. After his initial introduction, he's just happy to have some allies, but, later on he gets into that depression, but it's not as prevalent as it is in the older anime. And of course, dealing with the lilies. Unfortunately, this episode is all about the lilies, and they're fighting over petty shit. And Millie causes so much trouble that the rest of the lilies are ready to just kick her out. And Millie is all alone, and of course here comes the big bad wolf. His friggin' stranger danger. And then Millie gets captured by a shaman who doesn't have an oracle bell, because he couldn't pass. And so he just decides, I'll just take this little girl's. Although, honestly, if she could have her oracle bell stolen so easily, it's just like, are you really that capable? And then their main characters come upon Millie, and the guys just try to make off with her shit. Don't know why this guy would think it's okay to just steal this and go to the shaman fight. You're not gonna be any better off going to the shaman fight. And Lyserg is so nonchalant about it all. And of course they're just like, yeah, well, you'll get another chance in 500 years. And of course Yo is actually gonna help her out, because he's just such a good kid. And Lyserg, because he's still not on that protagonist shit, it's just like, why would you actually help out someone? Meanwhile, How's just like, oh god, they're doing filler shit. Meanwhile, the lilies are waiting for Millie, and then Millie tries to sketch up who she's after, and it's such a weird artistic style. And we use Lyserg's dowsing, and boom, immediately find the guy. And because the guy's on a friggin' bus, we get Oversoul Big Thumb, and then here comes Billy, because Billy. It's like, you sure that guy isn't Ryu's spirit? And of course the guy's just like, oh god, they followed me, and tries to speed up the buzz. And they end up going right off of a cliff, because shenanigans. Ultimately don't die. And then Ren's just like, go off the cliff too. Just do it. And I love how Ren challenges Billy. It's just like, do it. And Billy actually does it. It's the wildest shit. I swear the filler is so wild. Go right off the cliff. I love how half of them are all smiling. And despite the fact the guy used his Oversoul as a cushion, we also have, of course, Ren using his Oversoul as a cushion, because that's how they landed previously when the jet crashed. The Legend of Billy. And they go after the guy. And Bam accidentally hits the Oracle Bell and breaks it. He tries to hold Millie hostage, but in come the rest of the lilies. But her Oracle Bell is still broken. Sadness. And then, of course, Silva to the rescue! Because, of course, the fact that none of the patch are supposed to show up at this leg of the Shaman event. He's just like, oh yeah, we just have a replacement. It's actually in your fucking user manual! And that is the best running joke throughout this entire series in any of the filler. It's just like, it's in the user guide what happens if your Oracle Bell breaks. It's like, it's in the help menu. They're just like, oh my god, he's right. I didn't read up to there. She's like, of course. I actually love that. It's just like, yeah, it's in the user manual. Under the help session. But then it's just like, how do I contact you if I lose my Oracle Bell? And Silva pulls the slickest shit possible. Look over there. And then he pieces out. I swear to God, Silva, you piece of shit. And it's just like, there's no reason for them to be, like, antagonistic to each other at this point. You guys are essentially friends. And Millie thanks them. It's cute. I swear, I should just be skipping over all of this, but it's still, I there's a special place in my heart for some of this shit. And then you enter into episode 31, Forest of Spirits. Try to summon Billy, to no avail. You have all these miniature spirits fix up this town. Goblin Soccer, I swear to God that name. But Billy's stuck behind cows. And Lyserg is coming down with the angst again. Another episode, another angsty Lyserg. And then they think it's Billy, but nope, just an old couple. But they get a ride. And Lyserg knows something's up, but Yo's just like, they're not bad people. Don't worry about it. They get fed, and then they're begged to stay. In a very creepy manner. It's just like, nah, we've got places to be. It's obvious these are spirits who are happy that some shaman have come by. But as our friends try to get accustomed to their arrangements, some weird stuff starts going on. Like someone's playing a trick. And poor Ryu. Poor Ryu. And Lyserg's a buzzkill. And yet again, it's brought up, yeah, they're dicking around again. And now it's just like, God, fucking dealing with this filler bullshit. And then the old people reveal, yeah, we know you're shamans. And then the animation, like, takes a rise in quality all of a sudden. Like, we need you to deal with some dangerous monsters. And then the lilies are involved too, because filler. I swear to God. And of course, Yo's all in on it. We don't care about filler here. We're filler all the way. Lyserg's just like, I'm tired of this filler bullshit. And then the rest of the group reveal to the lilies, yeah, it's all a ruse. This is all just a game by spirits. Honestly, a lot of these filler episodes just make the lilies seem more and more pathetic by contrast. Like, yeah, it's just a whole bunch of spirits who like to play pranks. And Lyserg's just pissed because he's just like, we're wasting time! I wonder if they were trying to make Lyserg the voice of the audience. And then suddenly they're in a completely different setting. And this proves to be nothing more than an excuse to add in an action scene. Honestly, this proves to be nothing more than training to a certain capacity. And even Lyserg ends up in on it. Morphine's happy. And, you know, they're not harming anyone, so it's all good. And even Lyserg has a little bit of a fun time. I like seeing Lyserg taking down a peg. It's like, pull the stick out, Lyserg. I know you look like a twink, but you don't have to shove the stick up that far. And it's been a few hundred years since those spirits have had any fun. But of course, in comes Buzzkill How, destroying all these little spirits, 'cause he's a dick. What a douchebag thing to do. I know it was filler, man, but just not cool. And Lyserg is all too ready to fight, but the little spirits are just like, yeah, you guys are not ready to take that on. And the spirits are aware of how. And Lyserg is back to being mopey, because he can't be a positive character just yet. And then we finally get to episode 32, titled Horohoro's Bitter Taste of Friendship, or Taste of a Bitter Friendship, whatever you want to call it, which kind of adapts the goings-on in the manga and newest episode of the anime. So for the older anime, you have Billy basically not showing up yet again, with Ryu constantly using Oversoul Big Thumb and getting bupkis, because Billy is broken down. Honestly, they make Billy such a recurring joke. And they're starving, they have no food, they're in a desperate situation, and of course, freaking living ice dispenser. And Horohoro, because he's used to living off the land, it's just like, okay, I'll just travel beyond the mountains and find you some food. Which is such, I guess that's a better route for the character to go, rather than just being like, and then I ended up crashing my snowboard. And you have Horohoro trying to, capture himself some meat, only to encounter a boy riding a large bear, only for it to be revealed to be an oversoul, meeting a young boy named Alan who is very androgynous, a boy who rejected the offer to be in the shaman fight with bear called Dodo. And Horohoro kind of meets a kindred spirit with this Alan. Horohoro finally meets someone who understands his dream and wish. But Alan's all about the circle of life. Human hands must not touch animals. But it's just like, dude, it's not as though he's trying to waste it or anything. Here, have a dumpling I made out of corn. Bitter as shit. Meanwhile, with the manga and newer anime, Horohoro has woken up after his gnarly wipeout. Ends up meeting this young, freckled beauty. You get into chapter 92 of the manga, Horohoro Stirring Tale, Week 1. Our friends have arrived in Durango, Colorado, and are trying to figure out where the Patch Village could possibly be. But Horohoro has been missing for 3 days. Honestly, the interpretation in the manga and newer anime make Horohoro seem a little bit less competent, whereas in the older anime, at least he went out to help his friend. Horohoro's like, I've been asleep for 3 days, I gotta get out of here. And it's just like, nope, both of your legs are broken, bro. And Horohoro realizes why Kororo might have left him, because he was talking so highly of morphine, and he tries to leave anyway. And Bluebell introduces herself as a park ranger. Honestly, the confrontation between Bluebell and Horohoro is a lot more kind of impassioned in the manga, where she is questioning him being a foreigner, asking why he's around without a passport, and even goes so far as to threaten him with a gun because, if he goes out and gets mauled by the grizzly Apollo, that'll get Apollo put down. She also actually fires on Horohoro, which is really kind of messed up. There is a wanted large amount of gun use in the manga. But she settles down and tells him the tale. Apollo's parents were killed by poachers. Her father took him in. He had this wicked scar because of the shotgun blast to a face. They released him out in the woods, but he never really got used to humans or anything. And how she became a ranger in order to protect Apollo and her protection of nature, which lies in the connection between her and Alan in the older anime. Alan wants to protect nature because, he's a native and a shaman, whereas Bluebell wants to protect nature because she respects it in a certain kind of way, but she plays more in line with the law, whereas Alan, not so much. They cut out a lot of comedic moments between Bluebell and Horohoro too. Honestly, what the newer anime does a lot of is shortening a lot of the conversations, but making sure to keep it as on track of a conversation as possible, which has its ups and downs. And there's a lot of the passion from Bluebell too. Honestly, she's a lot calmer in the newer adaptation of the anime rather than in the manga. But she immediately understands he's not a poacher, just a snowboarder. That's about it. And Horohoro decides to try out a little something. Honestly, the look that Horohoro gets, I love it. But they really cut back on a lot of the details in the newer anime, which is a bit of a shame. But they've really updated Horohoro's look to the newer way that Hiroyuki kind of draws him. Upon my initial viewing, I'm just like, okay, why are they so set on having Horohoro have those bangs popping out? Because the manga at this point didn't really depict that, but later depictions that Hiroyuki does of Horohoro really has those bangs be very pronounced. Meanwhile, in the older series, everyone's just waiting for Horohoro to get back. It feels like such a stark contrast, where in one version, everyone's waiting around for Horohoro, relying on him. In another version, everyone's just kind of moved on. It's just like, oh, Horohoro will catch up with us eventually. Like, Horohoro, did you find our food yet? Alan shows Horohoro to a road. There's a lot of moments in both of these adaptations that Horohoro is trying to preach, look, humans are animals. They rely on animals for some form of sustenance. He tries to get both Alan and Bluebell in both adaptations to understand that, but to different kind of degrees. There's a bit of a message of deforestation in Alan's storytelling, which was a lot more common during the time that the older anime came out. There were a lot more messages about deforestation, which were easier to tell than a message about poaching. It really is such a weirdly stark contrast where Alan is so willing to just do all this damage, illegally on top of that, whereas Bluebell is operating within the law in order to do the right thing. Like, one version gets you a lot more action, another version, there's a lot more of a moral setting, if nothing else, and Horohoro confronting Alan about all this. Meanwhile, Bluebell has realized that Horohoro has gone out and might be encountering Apollo, who is a big enough a bear. And Horohoro has actually come to kind of pay his respects to Apollo. Try to preach peaceful coexistence with humanity. Get Apollo to go deeper into the mountains so that, he won't get threatened and nobody will be threatened by him. Meanwhile, with the older anime series, Alan and Horohoro kind of come to a head on the differences in their beliefs. Alan has been trying his hardest to ward off humans, but because humans don't really believe in spirits or fear them, they're not warded off. So Alan has decided to use force in order to stop them. But Horohoro knows that it'll never truly stop, as they just come back in fuller force. But Horohoro knows it'll just get worse from here on out. So Horohoro decides that, he'll confront Alan if he has to. It's actually fascinating in the older anime because you never see any other humans. You just see the vehicles. And then just more destruction happens because of Alan, including a massive forest fire that just rages on. By fighting against it, you've caused more damage than anything else, Alan. And so because of this, all these animals will lose their home. And it makes sense, they're very close to California, so it's just like, it would go up like a matchstick. It's like, you have to destroy part of the forest in order to stop the fire. And he's like, you want me to destroy nature with my own hands? It's just like, yes, there is no other way. You have to cut off the fuel to the fire. And then he brings out the tool that he got from his sister. Meanwhile, in the newer anime and the manga, Horohoro is having a heart-to-heart with Apollo in chapter 93 of Horohoro Stirring Tale, week 2. I don't know why they say week 1, week 2, so on and so forth, because I don't think it ends up being several weeks. I think there might just be talking about the fact that it's the second week of it being told in the manga volumes of Shonen Jump. He tells Apollo, get away from humans, go further into the mountains, find yourself a girl, but Apollo doesn't really listen to him or understand him. They also cut out the part where Bluebell actually runs over Horohoro with her car. It's funny because in the newer anime, Horohoro's talk about bears being gods is treated a lot more serious, whereas in the manga, Bluebell's just like, what are you, a fucking idiot? Horohoro's people are very naturalistic. They believe a lot of gods exist in a lot of things. Balance of humanity and all that. And you really get to know the connection between Horohoro and animal kind. And then he gets slapped by the bear. And Horohoro just lets Apollo beat into him. And then Horohoro explains why Apollo is the way that he is. Because the scent of humanity is on him, other bears are rejecting him, so he's treated as kind of an outcast. I don't know if that's an actual thing, but, it goes to show that good intentions can destroy too. And, Bluebell's worried because she doesn't want to have to put down Apollo. She understands where Horohoro is coming from, that maybe the intervention of humans did more harm than good in Apollo's life, but she still doesn't regret that she did it. but Horohoro wants her to believe in him. And there's a wonderful scene where Horohoro really bears his soul. It's so great. Such a wonderful way of doing this. And then Kororo is actually there listening, and then Apollo actually listened. And as Horohoro tries to share some sake with Apollo, bam! Shot down. Right then and there by a bunch of redneck hillbillies who are immediately shocked upon seeing a park ranger. And then you enter into chapter 94 of Horohoro's Stirring Tale, week 3, where he's just shocked that Apollo is dead. They finally connected and Apollo is dead. And the guys try to run. Horohoro's just like, listen, you took down this bear. Do not let that sacrifice go to waste. And while Bluebell tries to get him to understand that they're just poachers, Horohoro's just like, look, don't leave him here. Don't let it all just have been for a waste. That destroys the circle of life for the most part. But then Horohoro overhears them say that this was all just a sport to them. And Horohoro loses his shit. Bluebell's like, of course, did you think they were doing? Of course that's why they were here. If everyone were like you, my job wouldn't be necessary. And Horohoro goes chasing after them because of that, like a bat out of hell. It's interesting too because in the manga, the guy warns Horohoro, like, stop, get back, or I'll shoot. But there is no warning in the older anime. It's just bam, he just picks up his gun and boom, shoots. They all freak out. It's just like, oh god. But Horohoro just gets right back up, pissed off. I always love this scene of the bullets just lodged in Horohoro's ice that he instantly put up to protect himself. Like, it is so well depicted. Like, kudos to the newer anime for depicting these manga panels so well. And then he goes in after them. And this is where things kind of line up. Where he uses this special item in the older anime in order to unleash this oversoul in order to protect the forest. In the newer anime, he brings out this oversoul and these guys try to shoot him again, which is left out of the newer anime. He doesn't create an ice wall in order to stop the bullet, and then he calls upon his new oversoul. So Horohoro unleashes the full breath of his power in order to just cut down these trees. And whereas in the older anime, it's to stop a wildfire, in the newer anime, it's just basically to scare the poacher. He did want to kill them, but it wouldn't be right. And he just walks off. A lot more bitter than the loss of a forest. Because a forest, it can kind of grow back, but the life of that bear, it's not coming back. But it was at least to save the majority of the forest rather than lose it. So in the older anime, Horohoro comes back with meat that Ryu is all too ready to get his teeth into. And then everybody gets their bellies full. And then he actually brings everyone back to the forest to help clear away a lot of the destruction. A little bit of an environmental message. And then they till the land and then go about planting. A very nice, natural message. And then they all join in on the effort. Such a weird way of planting. But Lyserg's just kind of pissed off. She's like, gotta keep getting roped into this filler bullshit. Lyserg's problems are coming to a boil. Meanwhile, a solemn moment between Horohoro and Bluebell. It's funny too because the newer anime already had Horohoro give his headband as a tribute to Apollo, while in the manga he hasn't given it up just yet. And he has the bang down too in the manga too, so certain things that the newer anime put in there. Some sweet moments. And honestly, Horohoro with his hair down is freaking hot. I still don't remember when he said to Bluebell that he wanted to be Shaman King, but there's a nice comforting moment. A lot of people ended up shipping Horohoro with Bluebell, but it was obvious she was fairly older than he was. I think she was 22 at this point, and he's 13. A 10-year age difference, that's a bit much. And so Horohoro leaves behind his headband. And that ends the adaptation. Well, then in the older anime you have Filler McFiller with one of Hao's followers asking why Hao is so interested in Yo. And the follower asking, will you be mad if I kill this guy? The dude's just like, okay, I'm gonna go do that. And Hao is basically using this as a bit of a test. The last few episodes I'll go over are episodes 33 and 34. 33 is the mysterious Asakura. It centers around one of the followers of Hao, who is a filler character, Ashel. And because Hao has had to interfere with Yo kind of going off on these side quests, he says for Ashel to go out and kill some of Yo's friends in order to kind of deal with that lack of focus that Yo has. They try to send Big Bill along, but Ashel doesn't want the company. You get to see some of the machinations of Hao start to move, but this is actually kind of a setup for Hao. They're waiting at a bus stop in the middle of nowhere. Freaking tumbleweed. And Lyserg is getting a little pissy. A little piss baby. But then Lyserg senses something coming. That's not how dazzling works, but whatever. And in comes Ashel. And boom, fight scene! Get it on! And then Bill tries to take on Yo. And we get to see Billy's ability. Well, Big Bill's ability. In order to keep Yo away from being crushed by Ashel. And then the revelation that Yo is a descendant of Hao. And that Yo's just like, oh, that's why we look alike. So it's a rather mundane way of that revelation being put out there. But that's kind of how it's put out there in the manga, too. She's like, yo, you're a descendant of Hao. Just boom, boom. The fight rages on, and the monster can just repair itself over and over again. But our boys are tough, holding their own. And then Lyserg starts to lose a lot of his faith and everything. And Lyserg's just like, but he's a descendant of Hao. Just like, dude, Hao is several thousand years old. Most people are probably a descendant of Hao at this point. Yo brings out the big Furioku and knocks Bill down. And Yo joins the fight. And Ashel is too happy to have an excuse to kill Yo. And Lyserg pulls out Big Ben, the attack that never works. Yeah, Ashel is made from the ground. So as long as it's connected to the ground, it'll just keep reforming. It is not a matter of just destroying the ground. He only has so much Furioku to work with. And then boom! Ashel dies like a bitch. Utterly annihilated by none other than the X-Laws. Always love the X-Laws theme. It's so over the top. And they're all about vanquishing evil. And the evil, that is, Hao. But Yo isn't happy that they killed someone, and they try to welcome Yo's gang into the X-Laws. And of course Yo refuses. Just like, take some time, think it over. We'll see you later. What a bunch of pricks. But Lyserg, he was feeling that. And while everybody's feeling kind of bitter about the way things ended, Lyserg is a little happy about it. And Hao's actually interested to see where this'll go. And the final bit of filler is American Hot Springs, episode 34. Our heroes are on the road again. I just can't wait to get on the road again. The killing of the one person really was a plot point that comes up later on in the manga. They just decided to include that in someplace else, which really makes me question things. I guess the one death wasn't enough, but having the X-Claws kill 2 people, that's enough. The lilies are still following behind Yo. And yep, this is a lily story. Oof. In the face with a tire. Dealing with a friggin' rival. Weird. Took her spirit, which shouldn't work that way. The spirit shouldn't be trapped inside the medium. A weird rivalry. The things that these friggin' spirits can turn into. Not enough rhyme or reason to how it all works. And it's just like, should we take a break at this hot spring? And Lyserg's okay with it. That's how you know something is wrong here. And for some reason this woman wants to target Yo and his crew. Because of course. And the resort they end up is a lumping together of Japan and China. And of course they're mad. I actually kind of like that. It shows the ignorance of Westerners. They would be the people. Like, aren't you mad that your country is being made fun of? It's actually kind of weird for the spirit to be just what looks like a normal human girl. It's actually kind of depressing. And yeah, despite everyone not liking the X-Laws, Lyserg is really drinking the Kool-Aid. And everyone discussing why How is so interested in Yo. Leave it to Ryu to actually notice something's not right here. The lilies are trying to track down Tilda. Yes, of course, ping pong, the ultimate sport. Ryu is in the bath yet again. All too happy to see Lyserg. And Ryu realizes it's obviously a trap. Tilda got overheated, moving from one target to the next. Of course, showing up as Anna to try to get Yo's guard down. And Yo, of course, knew what the deal was. On to the next target, and leave it to Kororo to stop them. And of course, leave it to Ren not to be a fool in the slightest. And so they come after Lyserg, who already has a bit of a lingering interest in the X-Laws, of course. So they use that against them, and they wonder if maybe Lyserg got in trouble with the person after them. They really prey upon the one-track mind that Lyserg has. But in come the lilies, trying to get Sharuna's ghost back, and bam, taken down. It was like, you were about to get your ass shot. When you get saved by the Lily 5, you've kind of reached rock bottom, and all's well that ends well. But next episode, we get back to the plot with a little bit of Dracula. And so ends What's the Difference? This has been a long one just because everything is so all over the place. I put timestamps to help make sure that you get where you need to go, but everything is spread over so much filler, and it just kind of gets worse from here because everything gets divided up amongst so much filler because there's not enough story to propel the anime forward. It just continues to be this thing that spins its wheels for the most part. Now, don't get me wrong, I do enjoy some of the filler just because it gives us more time to spend with our main characters, but it really does interrupt the flow of the story, and you kind of start to understand where How and Lyserg are coming from because it takes them so much longer to get to the Patch Village as a result. But on the whole, the core story is the whole situation with Horohoro, Alan, and Bluebell, and which version you prefer. Do you like the story about a young boy shaman trying to save a forest, or the story of a young ranger girl who is trying to save the life of a fairly vicious bear who is just kind of misunderstood? Which lesson did you take the most away from? Which adaptation did you like best? Let me know in the comment section below. And if you like this video, please like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for notification. Until next time, I've been Duuz-Diz-Din, and you just watched What's the Difference? Later!